Welcome to the Private Practice Journeys podcast, where mental health professionals learn about the nuts and bolts of private practice by listening to the journeys of 4 therapists that have taken the plunge into private practice. And here's your host, Chris Quarto.
Hey everyone, this is Chris Quarto, and welcome again to Private Practice Journeys. Thanks for joining me. Well, this week is another special consultation episode of the Private Practice Journeys podcast series, where I pair up a guest expert in private practice development with one of our 4 therapists who I'm interviewing on a monthly basis throughout the course of 2017. This week, my guest expert is Lynn Grodzki. You may have heard of her. She's been around for a while and really one of the pioneers in private practice development. And I matched her with Cindy Norton. And I think that you'll really like this podcast episode. Unfortunately, my microphone setting was set wrong. And so what you're hearing right now, the quality of what you're hearing me say right now, it's not going to match what you hear on the podcast episode. It turned out okay, but I wish I would have had the other setting. But whatever the case, I think that you'll really enjoy this podcast episode. So without further ado, here's Lynn and Cindy. Hey everyone, this is Chris Quarto, and welcome back to Private Practice Journeys. This is one of our special episodes today where I am matching one of our 4 therapists, Cindy Norton, who has been a part of our podcast series since the beginning of the year, with an expert in private practice development, Lynn Grodzki. Lynn is a licensed clinical social worker and a business coach. And some of you may be familiar with Lynn, who early on in this area of private practice development wrote a book on building your ideal private practice. So we're excited about having Lynn on the podcast today. And Lynn, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And Cindy, welcome back.
Thank you.
Well, what we're going to do first is for the audience, I'm going to talk to Lynn a little bit first, just so you as the journey followers can get to know her a little bit better and what she's done, and about her approach to helping therapists who would like to go into private practice. And then after that, I'm going to just have Lynn do her consultation gig with Cindy, and we'll just kind of go from there. So Lynn, if you wouldn't mind, just tell the journey followers a little bit more about yourself. What haven't I told them that you would like them to know?
Well, I think what's helpful for people to know about me is that I came to being a therapist as a second career. And my first career was in business. I was in the family business, and I was the general manager of my father's scrap metal yard.
Is that right?
A very rough and tumble entrepreneurial business, very lucrative. And I learned a lot about business, but I wasn't really suited for that. So I went back to school and became a therapist. And over time, I kind of missed business. And I started running some classes for local therapists who I saw were having trouble with their businesses. And based on that, started a separate practice as a business coach. And I eventually became a certified coach, and I'm a master certified coach. So I also teach coaching for a very large coaching school. And I kind of marry these 2 things now. So I still work as a therapist in a private practice, and I've been doing that since 1988. And I work as a business coach, and right now I work internationally with therapists from across the globe. So I get to hear a lot and think about a lot as a result of this. And, what I find is that the therapists I work with, I consider them reluctant entrepreneurs. This is not the reason most of us got into business.
That's right.
Entrepreneurs, like a true entrepreneur, they get into business because they want to be in business, and they almost don't care what kind of business.
Right.
But for therapists, what we found through private practice is we like the delivery system of business, but many of us don't understand some of the basics or even the finer points of business. And I think that's my job. I'm kind of a translator between the principles and ethics and kind of purposes of therapy and a way to understand business and make it work for therapists.
Boy, what a great way to describe yourself as a translator. I like that. And it's interesting because if you look at mental health programs, whether it's social work, marriage and family therapy, psychology, none of us get any education in business. Who want to go into private practice, we don't get that. We just get the skills courses and the theories courses and all that kind of stuff, but we don't learn anything about business. And where are we supposed to learn all of this, And so when a person like you comes along and writes a book, and by the way, Lynn, when was that, your first book? When did you first come out with that?
Well, I wrote that book in 2000, and it's been revised, Building Your Ideal Private Practice. So in 2015, I revised it. But there's a number of other books that I've written in this way. So there's a workbook, and there's a book that was specific to the recession called Crisis Proof Your Practice. And then, I have also written 2 books on about coaching. One of them is about therapists that have become coaches, and one of them is just about if you're wanting to be a coach, kind of what you should know about the business of coaching.
It's interesting. So just kind of looking back at the Building Your Ideal Private Practice, that was 2000. And if you look back then, there really weren't many books out there that were written.
No.
Yours may have been the first because I don't recall seeing anything out there at the time, and it was really something new. And I think people were looking for some sort of an instruction manual, so to speak. And yours was really the first that provided therapists with this type of information. How was your book, your first edition of the book, received, by the way?
Well, it's the best-selling book of its genre. Yeah, and it's just been this wonderful calling card for me. So I've traveled the world speaking about this book. I've been to Australia, I've been to Europe, all across the United States. And I do know that as a profession, we need this.
Yes.
We need more information. It's not, see, the thing I feel like, Chris, is it's not just the information that we need, it's a real mindset.
Okay.
And I think that Cindy and I are going to get into that a little bit today. So it's not just knowing what to do or how to do it. It's also a question of who you need to become. Because if you were already a business person, you'd know these things.
Right.
So a lot of it for us is a mindset that we have to shift to. And it turns out that's the most difficult part for therapists and for anybody that's getting into business. And I just want to preface this by saying that small business has a very high rate of failure. In the United States, 50% of all small businesses fail.
Wow.
Every year. So, the fact that many of us are starting up a business with very little capital, not taking out big business loans, wanting to do it on the cheap, we're up against a lot to do that. And so the fact that therapists are doing as well as they are is like a great thing. Because they're doing it without a lot of information, and they're moving into a field that's notoriously hard to succeed at, small business.
Exactly. Yeah. So
I just think that to make people feel better.
Sure. Yeah, and there are a lot of challenges, of course, and a lot of things that they have to know. And this is sort of where you come into play, Lynn, in terms of coaching and things that you've done to help therapists develop their practices. And before I hand you over to Cindy, just to kind of do the on-air consultation here, I'm just kind of curious a little bit about what your approach is or your philosophy in helping therapists. How do you go about doing this generally?
Well, one of the things that I do, and I want to recommend this for everybody that's listening, is I get very strategic with therapists. And the very first step that people take when they're working with me is they fill out a survey. It's a free survey. It's on my website. It's easy to get. And a lot of therapists tell me just taking the survey helps them start to clarify what they need to do. And Cindy took this survey. It gives me a lot of information, but you don't have to work with me to take this survey. It's just right up on the website, and it will just start to organize your thinking and what your process is. So that's one thing that I do is I really work as a strategist with therapists. But another thing that I'm doing is, again, I'm really looking at, since we're all therapists together,
Yes.
I'm looking at what do you need to change inside yourself to make this easier or to get to your next goal or to expand. And usually there is some psychological development that needs to happen. And in my mind, that's the good news. Because we all love to work on ourselves,
Right.
As therapists,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
So this is something that's well within our purview. So I feel like both of these things are happening when I'm working as a business coach. There's a lot of information, there's a lot of strategy, there's a lot of planning, there's networking, there's marketing, all of that. But actually, that's the easy stuff in my mind. The harder stuff is, can you do the work on yourself so you can take those steps, so you can follow through?
Interesting. And I don't think a lot of people would really think about that part of it as much as they do the marketing and the strategizing like you had talked about. So that's really interesting that you bring that up.
And I just want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
One of my books is a workbook, and that's a great book for therapists to work with together. Okay. And I really believe that a lot of business development is easier when you do this with others. That's like the smartest way to be in business, is to do it in a real supported way.
Sure.
So even if, maybe consultation with me or another business coach is not in your future, you could develop a peer group of other therapists that want to work together, that want to grow practices. And with something like my workbook to facilitate, you could still have this kind of coaching and consultation and do it with other people. So I kind of believe that like a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yes.
And the better that we get as a profession in this way, the better it is for all of us and the more successful.
Yeah, I mean, putting your heads together to kind of look at these things, not feeling as though you're alone, that you can do this with other people, and having that peer support, it seems like a really good idea. So I like that.
Yeah. And in our profession, interestingly, we tend to be really isolated in our profession as business people. I've worked in other business spheres, and there's a lot more collaboration and information that's shared. So I feel like that's something that our profession needs to work against, is that tendency towards isolation.
Right. I agree totally. Well, Lynn, this is the part of the podcast episode where I'm just going to hand it over to you. And we have Cindy with us, and as you had said that she had completed that survey that you were talking about. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll probably chime in here and there, but I'm just going to hand over the reins to you at this point.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, Cindy.
Hi.
So I'm really glad to work with you, and I've read your survey, and I even went a little bit further and I looked at your website, so I kind of have a good idea of how you're presenting yourself and some of your goals. And given all this, what would be helpful for us to talk about today?
Well, like you mentioned earlier, I'm sure a lot of therapists may not agree with this, but I definitely agree that the marketing, the business side of it, the website, that stuff comes easy to me because I have an undergrad in business management. I've taken, marketing classes, and I enjoy branding and all of that. So for me, it's definitely the mindset stuff. That's where I kind of get stuck.
Wonderful. So that makes sense to me because I liked your website. I thought you were really clear there, and I'd be really glad to help you in any way that I can on the mindset. So what do you feel like is hardest for you, or what are the stuck places when it comes to your mind?
I feel it's easy for me to get really overwhelmed because I have all these great ideas of how I want everything to go, and probably just prioritizing different things in addition to just there's a lot of unknowns. So in my previous work, I initially started school to be an accountant, and a lot of that, like you can learn how to do that, and it's very specific, and you can feel like you really can kind of master that. But being a therapist, that's something that you're never going to I feel like you're never going to arrive. You're always going to be learning. You're never going to perfect that. And so sometimes it can get a little overwhelming just, wanting to be a good therapist and thinking, well, I need more training in this, or if that makes any sense. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling, but.
No, Cindy, it makes a lot of sense. And I actually liked a phrase that you used in your survey when you were talking about this, because it's a phrase that I hear very often, and you called it the imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just tell people a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Well, I know therapists have that throughout their careers. So it's not just like I'm going to have this for my first year or two and then it's going to be over. I know that this will be revisiting me. But how it's playing out for me right now is all my training and education has been in couples therapy, and that's what I've decided to specialize in. I've taken lots of additional trainings. I've completed all the Gottman Method couples therapy training, done the Prepare Enrich, but I still feel, because I'm just opening up this practice and I haven't seen a whole lot of couples, I just have that block, like I'm not going to be effective, or people won't refer to me because I hadn't been doing this for 10 years, or so that's how I'm feeling now, just starting out. I know that I have the skills necessary to do it, but I haven't been doing this for years and years.
Yes, and what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and it's not just for you, as you might understand. I think it's for our profession in general. There's a great book that's on my bookshelf called Selling the Invisible. And that's a lot of what we're doing as therapists, is we're selling the invisible, because the kind of process that we're offering is really hard to spot with evidence. It's hard for us to spot, and a lot of times it's hard for our clients to spot. So one of the things that I'm recommending for therapists is that you find ways to see results in a session, and you communicate those results with your clients. And you can do that at any level of experience. Do you understand what I'm saying, Cindy?
Yeah, that makes sense. Looking for evidence when you're working with the clients.
In the session,
Mm-hmm.
looking for evidence right as it happens. So what kind of evidence might you see in a session with a couple in any given session?
Well, I can give an example. I just had my first session with a couple in my private practice on this past Saturday, a premarital couple. And of course, I was really nervous about it, because this is the real thing. This is what I've been preparing for the past 8 years, and it's finally happening. And so I noticed in that session, because I was thinking before, I've never done this before, but this is what I've prepared my entire career for. And so what if it doesn't go well? Or what if, all those things kind of pop up in your mind? But it turned out to be the most amazing session. And it was so affirming to me, like okay, I've done it. And I know that there's a reason why I wanted to specialize in this, and it just felt so natural. So it felt more natural than any session that I've had over the past 2 years with any clients in my agency job or during my internship. So,
so this is an example, when something's going well, here's something that I do that you might think about doing. Mm-hmm. Is I will, in the moment, kind of explain to clients what's going well, what we're doing that's working. Because a lot of clients might leave a session feeling like, well, something happened, or I guess that was okay, but I'm not really sure why, even though we as therapists have a deeper knowledge and can see it. So the way that I think about this is I'm almost telling clients what I will be writing in my notes.
Yes.
So in the moment, I might say, whoa, let me just stop right here and point out what happened just in the moment. You said you have trouble communicating, but Susan, you said that really well, and your husband nodded his head. That was communication.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And then at the end of the session, I might say, let's talk about what you're taking away from today. And if they miss things that I saw, I'll even say to them, can I share with you what I'll be putting in my notes or what I think we did that was important?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times I think we don't make it this explicit, Cindy, but I'd really encourage you to, especially since you're noticing it.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great advice. And I think that will be a wonderful way to conduct the session and to get input back from the couple. Like you said, if there's something that I missed, and just highlighting those things that I noticed that's happening in the session that they might not realize, like, oh, this is really important.
And
Good.
Lynn, I just want to jump in at this point. Would this be a way also of marketing, in the sense that Cindy, if she were to do something like this, could say something along the lines of, I ensure that I have evidence to show that what I do is effective or is truly helping. Is there a way of kind of incorporating this evidence-based approach that you're talking about into marketing efforts?
There can be. So one of the things we want to watch is that we don't overpromise
Okay.
as a therapist, right?
All right.
But sometimes I'll ask therapists, what can you guarantee?
Mm-hmm.
And that gets at it in a similar way. So we often think, well, I can't guarantee results, and that's absolutely correct. You
Right.
can't guarantee results. But some of the things that we can guarantee are really important to our clients, but we don't even think to make note of this. So, for example, in this session, Cindy, that went really well, what could you have guaranteed your couple that you were willing to do or able to do with them?
Well, I just go back to the methods that I'm using, all of the evidence behind them, because I did use the Prepare and Enrich, and we went over the exercises there. And I also incorporated the Gottman method, which is just some of the different interventions that are, based on that research. And I mean, I can guarantee them that I'm going to do my best as a therapist to support their relationship. And also, there's one thing that I think is really important is if I notice at a time that I'm not being effective with them, kind of being open and discussing that and talking about referrals, or if I see that they might work better with someone else, instead of trying to just because they're my client, like keeping them there, even if I notice that we're not moving forward. So I think that's something that I could guarantee them, that I will find them the most appropriate, the best help for whatever their needs are.
Yeah, see, that's really important. So, if I was going to reframe what Cindy's saying, I'm hearing her say that she's going to be present, that she's going to bring all of her knowledge to the session and methodology,
Mm-hmm.
that she's going to make sure that she's met their goals for the session. And if she can't meet their goals, that she's going to look with them for other referrals that
Right.
could better do that. Those are high value offerings, I think, for a therapist. And most of us would say, oh, of course I do that. Of course I'm present. Of course I listen
Right.
well. But for our clients, that means something. So I think that we can be more explicit. And then again, if you are really good at getting certain results in a session, maybe there's a way to say that. And again, not to promise it, but certainly you can say, in many of my sessions, clients say that what they are satisfied by is the following.
Okay.
They get
Yep.
to completely air their feelings, that they feel like they had things to take away that were useful for them, that they know what they're going to do next, whatever it is in the method that you work.
Mm-hmm.
And even working psychodynamically, even if you don't work strategically, I feel like you can do the same thing, because I was trained psychodynamically, and I could at the end of a session say to somebody, here's what I thought happened here today that was valuable, and that was a form of progress.
Yes.
Good. So I think that's one way to address feeling like an imposter. Another thing that I would just want to say about this is I do feel like there's something about our profession where there is this kind of culture in the profession that you never feel like you've gained mastery.
Yes.
Right.
I don't know where that comes from. When I read Freud and the early therapists, boy, that was really big then. You could never one up, and they could always find something you hadn't done well. And I remember when I was in supervision with a therapist, and I was in supervision with her for a long time. And one day I said to her, "Is there anything in this case that you think I did well?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, why don't you say so?" I told you all the things I missed. And she said, "I don't know. That's just the way I was trained to do supervision." And that makes it hard because we're working in isolation so often. It's really tough when we see these masters on the stage at a conference, or we read books and people are just telling us these cases that they've slaved over and worked on, to feel like, wow, I'll never be able to do that. Okay.
Yeah.
But our clients don't need that level of mastery. They kind of need a lower level of progress and results. And what you're telling me, Cindy, is you could see that even in small ways in a session. And if you make that explicit, that's an important takeaway.
Yes, what you said, that really resonates, because whenever, if you get really too caught up in the, I don't even know the word for it, but in the culture of the therapist, versus whenever you're thinking about your clients, they're not in that group. Like they're not going to know that you're not the master of whatever it is that you're doing. They're looking for some basic help for their relationship. And
That's right.
whenever you surround yourself with other therapists that have all these other different methods of training and different models, and I feel like I'm never going to know all of this stuff, I just have to come back to me and know that my training and education is going to be good enough to provide help for the couples.
Yeah, that's really important. And I love what you said, because I heard two things. One is that it's good enough for now for the couples, and also you're still in your process of training. So of course you're going to still be engaged, still learning more. But it's like if you have somebody who's drowning, and needs to learn how to swim, they don't care if you're a master swimmer. if you're yelling, breathe, that's helpful.
Yeah, because I may, just thinking about that example, like if they're drowning, they're not going to care if I throw them a just one of those little round life flotation devices, or if I come on a speedboat and come and rescue them. So I mean, I'm still going to save them from drowning.
Right.
Yeah. Good. So I'm glad that that can help you shift a little bit from that imposter syndrome.
Yes.
So what's next, Lynn, in terms of facilitating these consultations that you do? So we've kind of addressed some of these initial issues, including the imposter issue. Cindy has completed your survey. What other things would you do at this point with Cindy?
Well, I'd probably be looking at what Cindy wants for herself, what she wants for her goals.
Right.
Okay. And if I can just share, Cindy, some of the things that you said that you wanted. One of them was that she wants to define her niche and update her marketing materials. And we heard that Cindy loves to be a brander, so that makes sense to me. And then she wanted to start to take some of this out into the community to have more visibility, to offer maybe a workshop or some talks. That makes sense. Then she's thinking about ways that she can reach out to more couples therapists in the community. And I love that idea. What can you offer that brings people together around you? And, she's thinking about some growth, building an email list, creating more content on her website, and maybe even making a video for the website. So those are all, good things to do and strategic things to do that would help her grow more, have more visibility, move the practice forward, network more. I think of it as building a community of people around the practice that can start to refer to you. And, these days we know referrals come from anywhere and everywhere. It's not just professionals that are referring. It can be all kinds of people in the community that could refer to you. So the more people, it's like the more the better.
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm Gladwell used to used to say it was the strength of weak ties, and that's what builds a business. So it's not how deep the connections are, it's how many people you know. So in business, that's what you're always trying to do. You're just always needing to be out there in some way. And fortunately, there are lots of ways to be out there. So we just have to find what's comfortable for you and help you keep repeating this and doing this over time, whether it's speaking or writing or networking or taking people to lunch or, social media or LinkedIn or whatever it is that you like to do. You'll just be repeating that a lot over your career.
Yeah.
Lynn,
Yeah, and a lot of it
go ahead.
is knowing when I'm ready for the next period of growth, or the next maybe you might call it up leveling, or just like growing in your business. So I noticed that something that's really stood out to me just over the past couple of weeks is the importance of creating space for your business to grow. Because even though I opened up my practice in January, just on Saturdays, I was still at my full-time agency job, and I found like I was the first month or so, I was just thinking, why isn't anyone calling? Why don't I have any clients? But then on the other side of it, I was wishing that no one would call because I'm so busy with this agency job that I don't feel like I would be able to give my full self and full attention to these clients on the weekend. So it's almost like I had that block there where I was wondering why people weren't calling, but I didn't want people to call because I didn't feel like I was ready for it or had enough space for them. But then once I decided and took that step in leaving my job and deciding to go, start doing some contract work, that's when I actually got people scheduling and making appointments. So
I don't like, that's kind of like an attraction theory, when I'm ready, when I'm open, people will come, or if you build it, they will come. And what I can say from where I sit is, I don't know. I don't really know what determines the flow of people. It seems at times just to be somewhat random in terms of how, because it takes a while for therapy. It's not like somebody automatically goes, oh, I'm ready for therapy, I'll go to therapy. There's a waiting period for people. This is, nobody's happy about needing therapy. It's not that anybody skips down the street and goes, oh, great, now I need therapy. So there's a lot of resistance, especially in this country, to getting yourself to therapy. And as a result, there's a lag time between referrals and people actually being sent to you for therapy, and then them being ready to call you for therapy, or even seeing your online information and being ready to make that call. So there is a way that you have to kind of be in action all the time. And what I say is, rather than focus on the results of your action, because that can get you very discouraged, because you could do a lot of marketing and not have anything coming towards you. You need to focus on the process of your marketing. You just need to stay in process long enough to see the results come in. Okay, because you have to kind of detach from the results of anything, whether it's products that you're trying to sell or referrals that you're trying to get. Eventually, your practice will grow as you do these things, because that's just the way that business works. You don't know, because there's all these variables, because we don't know at the rate it's going to grow. We can't guarantee that, because there may be competition. Maybe you're not positioned quite right. Maybe there's something wrong with your message. Maybe there's not a big enough market. There's all these other factors. But if you just stay in motion with your goals, things will happen over time. It's not rocket science. It's just business.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've always told myself, like, I know for a fact, 100%, I know that I'm going to be very successful. And I'm pretty sure that that's going to be within the next 3 to 5 years. And I know that. And it's just kind of managing that in the meantime when I'm, taking this leap into going into a contract position where I may be working a couple of days a week and then having to pay my own insurance and pay my own taxes, and just trying to make, the money work for this first year or two, because I know that maybe someone that I met with for coffee 2 months ago, I might get a referral from them in, 5 or 6 more months. So it just takes a while for things to accumulate and for you to get, situated in your market. So I don't have any doubt that this is going to work out. I know for a fact it is. It's just the timing, and that's something that you really can't predict.
Right. But there is one thing you can do, Cindy. And so if you're pressured about income, and I know a lot of people are when they're starting a business, what you can do is more. So you can task yourself with the time that I have, what is my marketing plan? And how much could I allow myself to do in a week or in a month? And usually there is, when people are really focused on business and working hard, they're doing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing a lot persistently. And to do this, some of the therapists listening may feel like, oh gosh, that feels so difficult. That's the mindset piece.
Yeah.
Okay? So really strong entrepreneurs are incredibly persistent. And you may need support of all kinds, a structure, or somebody that's patting you on the back, or somebody that you're accountable to stay persistent. But that helps in business. So if you're feeling like, if I lose a lot of clients, okay, over just through attrition, and that happens as a therapist, sometimes it's just like a bunch of people get done and they're just leaving. Part of what kicks in for me is time to market harder, time to do more, time to look at what's my plan for the month and where could I leverage my marketing efforts the best. And to do that, you might want to, you can read my book because I have a lot of suggestions there, or you can talk to somebody else, or you can think or plan. And then it's just the follow through. And that's, so I guess what I'm saying, Cindy, is I think that's the best antidote to anxiety, is just doing. So it's just, okay, well, what am I going to do? And not random doing, but, with a plan, with a strategy.
Yeah, I don't think I'll have any problem doing that, because I probably work in this business, even though I'm just now getting up and running. I may spend 20 plus hours a week just, some of it is just processing different ideas and then coming up with a different marketing plan, or rebranding, or updating my website, or there's so many things I have on my list. So I'm constantly busy. So that does make me feel a lot better, because I know that I'm working in my business. And it's not that, oh, well, I only have one client scheduled this week, so there's a few days where I'm not doing anything. And it's not like that. I still work in my business on those days.
Great. And, another thing that's really important to do for therapists is we have to come out of our offices and connect with people. Because we know now, the strongest referrals for therapists are twofold. One is person to person by networking. That's still a tried and true and great way to get referrals. And then the second is online, okay, through directories like Psychology Today, or having a strong website. So Cindy has a great Psychology Today profile and a strong website. So probably for her, she's just going to be needing to make more personal contacts, getting to know more people, letting them getting to know her in this new way, because she's reinvented herself. And over time, that community will feed her practice.
And that's, and I guess that's one of the things that I was wondering about, Lynn, is because Cindy has done an incredible job with the initial marketing efforts with her website and blogs, and everything that she's done is just really fantastic. And she's wanting to take it to the next level, as she had said earlier. And I wonder, with the therapists that you've worked with, what you've identified as maybe some of the stumbling blocks or the challenges of, where, kind of where Cindy is at right now to taking it to the next level. What are maybe a stumbling block or two that you've identified in your work with them, Lynn?
Well, one of the stumbling blocks is we feel uncomfortable making these kinds of contacts, because we feel like it's one down. Like one therapist said, I feel like I'm begging for a referral, or I'm going hat in hand. But you're not. You've got a resource, and your resource are your services. And all you're doing is letting people know that you have this resource, and that you have openings in your practice. And those two things together are really important. The fact that you have openings doesn't mean that you're a failure. It just means you have space and you can see people right away. And that's a great message for anybody that you're talking to. So I feel like kind of learning how to make those contacts. Sometimes we script it out, what to say if you're going to make those calls, how to follow up, how to get in front of somebody. And, some people do this with doctors, although doctors are not ideal these days because they're hard to get in front of. But like I say, there are a lot of other kinds of professionals and even non-professionals who make referrals. So it's a question of getting out of your office at least once a week and meeting somebody, going to lunch, saying hello. Sometimes people will say to me, I'm in an office building full of lawyers, family lawyers, who could refer to me, and I'm shy to go knock on the door and say hello to them. But there's a great resource right there, right there. And it just, if you could, that's the mindset piece. If I could help you or anybody could help you feel braver and learn to do this. And some therapists have really learned this as well. I've heard from therapists who in the beginning of working with me were like, no way in the world would I do that. Shifting to, I like this. It's fun for me. We have a great services that we're offering. We have great professional pride in what we can do. And if you could learn to like this, that makes you a really great business person.
It's almost like exposure therapy.
Yeah.
Cindy, go ahead. We're getting toward the end of our podcast interview, but I wonder, Cindy, if you have any other things that you'd like to ask Lynn at this point that haven't been covered yet today.
Yeah, I was just going to say that that's great advice. And even though I'm an extreme introvert and typically I'm pretty shy in my business, in the therapy world, I have been meeting with people weekly for networking lunches, and it's just been great. And it's so interesting to see how different I am in my business versus how I am personally, because I really enjoy that networking and reaching out to people. And I'm totally fine with just walking up to someone, introducing myself. So, and I think that's really important for therapists to do, because you're, by doing that, they're getting to know you as a person. And I think that's really important for referrals.
Great.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful strength.
Yeah, probably one thing I did want to ask is maybe the best way to manage money, because you think that you have an idea of when money's coming in and how much is set aside for taxes and just how to go about all of that. And I was listening to a podcast where someone had mentioned the book Profit First, and it just seemed to keep coming up. And I didn't know if you had heard of it or if you have any recommendations about how I need to maybe just get started with that, so I have a good solid foundation with managing my money.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's really important that it be on paper. Okay, that's the first management tool, and that you are you have some kind of an Excel spreadsheet or something where you have all your money that you can see at a glance in front of you, and you become as familiar with your money assets and your debt and your liabilities as you would be looking in the mirror and seeing what kind of hair day you were having today. So we want your eyes on this a lot. And it's really important that for a lot of therapists, because if they're using insurance, there's an unknown factor there, which is when will I get payments? You have to follow this up. And if you don't have a billing service and you're going to be your own billing service, you just have to stay on top of this. It's just one of those tasks of business is that, they say, follow the money, honey. And that's what you have to do. So, however best you can do this. For some of the people listening, sometimes your accountant, if you have a personal accountant, you can ask them to help you develop some kind of an accounting system for your business. If you have a bookkeeper, ask them to help you develop an Excel spreadsheet so that you are tracking money. And there's one more piece of this, which is just getting comfortable talking with clients about money. And it's kind of a longer conversation, but I have a chapter in my book in Building Your Ideal Private Practice, the second edition, that gives you a lot to think about if you are not comfortable, what you can do to get comfortable, and how to make this more of a basic negotiation with your clients so that you don't have any accounts receivables. You don't have money that's owed to you that you can't ask for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. And I bought your book not too long ago because it's been on my reading list for a long time because I have such a large reading list. But I read through it last month, and it is amazing. And a couple of the things that stood out to me, I've already started practicing with the business affirmations. And so I started today, writing those down and writing down what thoughts come up, and just keep doing that until I don't have any more negative thoughts about that. And then also I went through the exercise about articulating your message. So I think those two things really stood out to me to kind of start with.
Great. I'm glad it was helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, and actually that's one of the things I want to just ask you about, Lynn, in ending our podcast here today. If anybody wants to purchase Building Your Ideal Private Practice, how can they get a hold of that?
Well, I don't sell the books myself, so they're sold through my publisher, but they can find it on Amazon, and my publisher is Norton. And a good way to reach me is at my website, which is privatepracticesuccess.com. And I do have links to the publisher's page for the book. So if you're really looking for it, that's a good way to find it.
And if anybody wants to consult with you, they can do that, and they can get a hold of you through your website as well. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they can consult with me, and it's explained very clearly there what the process is. And it actually starts with a free session, a free 30-minute session where I can see if I'm the right coach for you and if we can work together well. And with that survey. So again, if you think that you're ready to be a little bit more strategic, fill out the survey and see, and it'll just be step by step to see if I might be of use for you.
Wonderful. And Cindy, if people want to get a hold of you or check out your Facebook page or website, how can they do that?
Yeah, my website is avlcouplestherapy.com, and you can find me on Facebook under AVL Couples Therapy as well.
Okay. Well, listen, I appreciate both of you coming on today. This was a wonderful conversation. Lynn, you provided a lot of great advice, not only for Cindy, but for all the Journey followers who are listening, who are thinking about going into private practice themselves, or who are just starting and needed that advice of where do I go next? And you provided a lot of good information, so I really appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for doing this. I think it's a wonderful podcast for people, and I'm so glad that you're giving this your all. And we can all.
I really appreciate
it. It's
that.
lovely to meet you this way.
Yes, and thank you, Lynn. This has been amazing. I've gotten such good information, and I know I'm going to be going back listening to this again and again just so I can make sure that I got all the little nuggets out of it. And thanks to Chris for making this, for giving us this opportunity. This has been awesome.
It's just fun. Okay, yes. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. All right, another great episode, and boy, I tell you, having these consultants on, Joe Sanok the first week, and Allison Purrier, and today Lynn Grodzki, interacting with these therapists, providing them with consultant advice, boys, it's just been a wealth of information. I think that any of this that you can apply to your own private practice and use it to be successful. So, two of the things that Lynn talked about today that I thought were important were persistence and focusing on the process. Persistence, she had mentioned that any strong entrepreneur is going to be incredibly persistent, and I couldn't agree with that more. Looking at my own development as a private practitioner, there were many things that I did that I didn't want to do, but I stuck with it and I did them. And boy, I've really reaped the benefits of that in having a very successful private practice at this point. But also how Lynn had talked about focusing more on the process than the results, and that will take away some of the anxiety that you have when you're developing your private practice. So nice to have her on talking about some of these things today. By the way, if you want to learn more about Lynn, about her consultation practice, check out her website. I have her website information, or her book information, as well as Cindy's information in the show notes that you can get on my website, chrisquarto.com. It's CHRISQUARTO.com. And actually, if you want to listen to any of the past episodes, Private Practice Journeys episodes, you can check them out there as well. Well, thanks for listening. I don't take any of you for granted. I know that it takes a lot to listen to these podcast episodes. This one today was about 45 minutes or so. So I really appreciate you taking the time out to listen to this. And until next week, have a great rest of the week.